Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Uncanny Treks. We are possibly inaugurating a new miniseries. We are possibly going to cover a bunch of Hush comics to get hyped for Hush 2. I know we're both really excited about Hush 2. The man who's the most excited about Hush 2 is Matt from the Southland. I'm Bob in Cascadia. Matt, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right, Bob. Just for the listeners, we need to rank our excitement of Hush 2. Bob makes it sound like my excitement for Hush 2 is through the roof. It's like maybe a 4 or 5 out of 10. What about you, Bob? Sure. What is your
Well,
excitement for Hush 2?
on a sincere level, 0 out of 10. But on an ironic level, maybe 7, 8. I really don't like Jeff Loeb. I really don't like Jim Lee. I really don't like Hush. I really don't like what Hush did to Batman comics, which we'll talk a
Yeah.
little as we go. So on a sincere level, not at all, but on a, oh, well, Batman comics were already ruined and this can't be worse than the Chip Zdarsky run. I guess on that level, okay, I'm morbidly curious to see what they do.
That's the key word, Bob. Curious. I have curiosity about what they're going to do. Not that I'm like excited as in I think this is going to be something great for Batman and comic books.
Well, let me pose an interesting dilemma to you, Matt, because at the same time, admittedly without Tim Sale, who died, RIP, always liked Tim Sale, Jeff Loeb is returning to the Long Halloween series and doing the last Halloween. It's already started. We're maybe 3 or 4 issues in. Are you more excited to read the whole of Hush 2 or to read the whole of the last Halloween?
Definitely the whole of Hush 2, because I've already read the first.
Oh, you already have.
I have, and I am not excited. I don't want to pick up the next one. I'm just not even that into it.
I am definitely more excited. I mean, to the extent I'm excited for either, which is not much. I'm more excited in a sincere way for the last Halloween. Although I will say there's an interesting thing here of even though I hate Hush, I think it's one of the worst Batman comics of all time. I was morbidly curious to do it with you, and I'm morbidly curious to do other Hush comics just because they're so bad. And also, if we have time, we're gonna fit in my one of my favorite Batman comics of all time, Broken City, which immediately followed Hush, and is in some weird ways comparable to Hush, and in some weird ways not comparable at all to Hush. But so I'm excited to cover Hush with you. And if you wanted to do it, or if I wanted to do it, we could do an episode on the last Halloween when it's done. But I was thinking, would I want us to go back and do episodes on Long Halloween and Dark Victory? And the answer is no, I wouldn't. So it's interesting that even though I dislike Hush more than Long Halloween and Dark Victory, the precursors to Last Halloween, I'm willing to talk about Hush with you. I'm not willing to talk about Long Halloween or Dark Victory.
Well, I think it's because Hush was such a pivotal moment in Batman's history and mythos, Bob.
This is obvious, and I think I've said it on the air before, but just to stress, if listeners don't know this, and if you do know it, I apologize. It really did change the way DC did both Batman and Superman, because before this, the assumption was Batman and Superman would always sell. You didn't have to put the top talent on Batman or Superman. And if you did want to put the top talent on Batman or Superman, you did it in the form of a graphic novel. You didn't do it on the main books. And so putting Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee on Batman really, really has fundamentally changed both how Batman and Superman operate.
Because they know that Batman and Superman are their cash cows, and they've got to get really good creators and writers on there.
I still think it might be kind of economically detrimental in the long run because a more sustainable strategy would be you use your big creators to get hype for stuff. And then you content yourself with steady returns from Batman and Superman. And then you try to get your big returns with big talent elsewhere, including in graphic novels with Batman and Superman. To me, that seems like a more sustainable thing. Whereas if you're just throwing all the top talent at the big characters and then there's nothing for the mid characters, to me, I don't like that. And I don't think it's as sustainable. But on the other hand, they've been doing it for 20 years. So what do I know?
I would say Jim Lee's on the top. He's at the top of the company and still doing all the art for these comics.
Is Hush 2 going to do the kind of business they want it to do? I have no idea. I don't follow the comics market anymore, but it's an interesting question.
That is a good question, and I would be curious because I know that people aren't going to be going and picking up these individual issues like I was back in the day. Because I was going to the comic stores picking up the issues week by week for the stuff you had to see, but we didn't have digital comics that time.
This is definitely way pre-digital, way pre-digital. I guess one other little preface thing I wanted to say, Matt, partially to be perverse, I was initially thinking, I'll just read Hush in that Batman Noir edition. You know, they have those black and white Batman Noir editions.
Oh gosh,
And
Bob.
I actually got the black and white edition, and I gotta say, man, Jim Lee's art without the coloring, there's a lot of comics art I like without coloring. Jim Lee's art without coloring, oh boy, I do not think it looks good. I think he really needs the coloring to draw out his different textures and all his detail work. I think in black and white, it doesn't look great.
Yeah, I remember them putting out the black and white variants and making a big deal out of that art. They even put out, I believe, action figure variants with the black and white. To me, it was hideous. I agree with you, Bob, on this. It's probably the one thing we're going to agree on this episode. But yeah, that the black and white art is awful. There's even this coloring book at Ollie's that redoes the first issue of Hush. The adult coloring books are this thing now. There's all this shading on it, so I don't understand how you color it.
Let's plunge into this, Matt. So, speaking of technological change, you had an interesting point to start us off with in Batman number 608, Hush Part 1, Rants.
Ransom Bob. Yeah, so Batman is attacking a bunch of thuggy people or whatever, and he has these computer lenses in his cowl that what comes to be known later on as Detective Vision in the Arkham games.
That's a terrible name. I
Yeah,
did not
well,
know that. That's awful.
yeah, well, that's what it is. Anyway, so with the Detective Vision, this is probably the first time we've actually seen this in action because I went back to Bruce Wayne Fugitive and all that territory, and he's still using night vision goggles. This may be the first time we get this digital interactive piece in his cowl lenses. It's similar to what we see with Iron Man.
I want to say no just to be perverse, but I definitely don't know a better answer or an earlier answer. And yeah, it's very plausible. You may well be right about this. It is interesting thinking about this arc in general as what you're saying, symbolizing a more technological Batman.
Even if you go back to just one previous run, the computers, the way the computers are drawn and stuff in the Batcave look nothing like what you see in Hush. It's a huge change in the way things look.
Well, and if I'm remembering correctly, the main writers before Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee took over are Ed Brubaker, Greg Rucka, Devin Grayson.
Correct.
I think they all see Batman in a very different
Yeah.
way than Jeff Loeb does. And personally, it's a way that's way more compatible with how I see Batman.
Yes, and much more compatible with Broken City.
Yes. Well, another thing just to say in hindsight, looking at this issue. So a lot of the action of this first issue is Batman rescuing this kidnapped kid. And we didn't know this when we were reading this as kids, Matt, but in hindsight, it's really interesting how much this kidnapped kid recalls Tommy Elliott. I don't think there's any actual connection, but it's just thematically a little interesting that Loeb is leading off with Tommy Elliott of the present being captured, right?
Right, and if the thing is, like, all the flashbacks of Tommy Elliott as a child are in that, like, different style, seeing him here, seeing this child with the coloring and everything looks probably is how that child would look. It would look the same.
Without the special pencil effects and coloring effects on the
To show the
flashback
flashback.
pages. Yeah. I will also say famously, and we'll probably get to this either this episode or next episode, Broken City feels very disparate from Hush in a lot of ways, as you've mentioned. And especially the portrayals of Killer Croc. Here, Killer Croc is a mutant up sort of man-bat character. In Broken City, he's a pimp. But it is interesting that in both cases, it's Croc is a very money-driven character, right? He really needs that money, although that takes different forms. In this issue, it's he needs money for a cure. In Broken City, it's, oh yeah, he keeps having to go to the dentist because Batman keeps breaking out his teeth.
So, is this canonical to you?
Is Broken City canonical, you mean?
Yeah, Bob, is Broken City canonical at this point?
Yeah,
Like,
it's in the main Batman book, Matt. Everything that happens in the main Batman book is canonical.
okay, okay. So, let me ask you this, Bob. Did you dig the evolved design here of Killer Croc?
No, not at all. I think it's awful.
Yeah, I thought it resembled the lizard from Spider-Man, specifically the animated series version, way too way.
You're exactly right about that. And it's basically, I think Jim Lee, especially trying to ape what Todd McFarlane does with the lizard in the first 5 issues of the adjectiveless Spider-Man comic from the early 90s, only about 10, 12 years difference when this book came out. That's the origin here.
Well, that makes sense then. Yeah, like it's and they even made like an action figure of this version of the lizard. So I kind of thought it might stick around. I know the lizard has the wrong name. The action figure of this version of Killer Croc, and I thought it might stick around. But we get our pimp version in the next.
Well, then
part.
I gotta confess, I don't know what Killer Croc looks like the next time he appears after Broken City. I mean, I'm sure I've read it, but I just don't remember what it even is.
I'm gonna have to find out.
It's an interesting question. I assume it was probably more the Jim Lee version than it was the Eduardo Riso version, but who knows? Another thing about Lee's art, Matt, I have to say, and you're going to make fun of me for this, but the legacy of Lee's art I actually hate the most is I think he was the first to really do the treads on Batman's boot. And I hate that. He does it on Batman. He does it on Huntress. I really dislike it.
So, Bob, do you just think Batman has smooth bottom boots jumping in on all these like rain soaked rooftops and chasing criminals down all these like trash covered streets and alleyways. He's got flat toed shoes. Like, really? Is that what you think?
To me, Batman is a ninja, and so I always imagine the costume being more cloth ninja costume than I do
Uh,
this mix of athletic gear and Kevlar. I know in a realistic way that doesn't make sense, but I'm not super concerned with my Batman comics being realistic.
Bob wants him wearing hockey pads.
A GCPD blimp, it felt very Batman the Animated Series, and I did like that.
In this scene, Bob, we see he's chasing Catwoman and his rope is cut. And he even refers to it as the bat rope, which I thought was hilarious. Even back then, I do remember everyone at this time speculating that it was Deadshot that cut the rope.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember you speculating that to me now that you say it.
And one other name that was mentioned back then that everybody laughed at was Captain Boomerang, but that clown's made a comeback.
Right after this, in Identity Crisis, Captain Boomerang does kill Tim Drake's dad.
Right. Captain Boomerang could have made sense too. Just saying. Yeah. Who cut the rope?
Yeah.
That was the first question in Hush.
Another thing that's kind of interesting for I don't know if this is the first time somebody did this with Poison Ivy, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was. But the splash page of Poison Ivy in this first issue, they're really teasing bisexual Poison Ivy, which later becomes a real big thing in her relationship with Harley. And so that's funny that arguably Lee and Loeb are starting to move Poison Ivy to the bisexual icon she is today.
Rereading with hindsight, they were definitely testing the waters and subtly pushing boundaries with her character and a lot of these characters that we see eventually that are coded as bi.
First issue of Hush. To move on to 609, number 2, Friend. Matt, you had another technology question for me?
Yeah, Bob, a lot of technology questions going on here. When Batman falls from the sky, there's a bunch of people in Crime Alley that want to beat him up. They immediately see someone fall from the sky. They want to beat the crap out of him. So they try to get his suit open and it starts shooting poison. And one guy tries to mess with the chest plate and it shocks him. This is too much, Bob. I mean, I guess it is
Yeah,
for you.
it's way too much. It's way too
It's
much.
overkill for you. I think Hush is when Batman started becoming more Iron Man.
You'll see the apotheosis in this and the climax of Scott's Court of Owls run, or in Pete Tomasi and Patrick Gleason's Batman and Robin run when Batman's just getting into flying suits of armor. But yeah, this is definitely laying the groundwork for that.
Oh yeah.
Well, Matt, speaking of bad costume choices, I despise Jim Lee's Huntress costume. I hate it so much. And Huntress is one of my favorite characters. Seeing her in this way really, really irritates me. And this one, I'm not as sure if it's Jim Lee's fault because the cross is a big part of Huntress's motif in the 90s. But having her have a Huntress cycle with a big cross on it, that also looks super lame. I really hate, I just hate everything about Huntress in this.
But I
in
think
this
you
run.
can take I think that's her shield, though. I think she has a shield. I think that's part of it. I think she takes it off the motorcycle, but I'm not defending it. It's stupid looking, but I think that's the point. I never really had a big issue with the Huntress outfit. Is it the midriff being exposed that bothers you so much?
That's a large part of it, yeah. And I also just think it's much less cool compared to some of the older costumes she has, especially the one I associate with Graham Nolan, which Matt helpfully gave me a visual image of Huntress costumes. The Graham Nolan one, I think, is the one more or less in the middle. Another thing I resent about this comic is that this became the default Huntress design for 10 years or so. And some of the best Huntress comics are actually, I really like 90s Huntress, but some of the best Huntress comics are her in Birds of Prey with Black Canary, written by Gail Simone. But unfortunately, under the shadow of Hush, that Gail Simone run, largely illustrated by Ed Benz, another kind of sub Jim Lee artist who I don't really care for. And it's a very similar costume in that run to this Jim Lee Huntress. And it really annoys me that one of her best runs is in this costume.
One day, Bob, AI is going to be so good. I'm going to go replace all those images of Huntress with the other costume just for you.
Matt, I'm going to fact check you on that and say, as somebody who was grading a lot of AI papers last night, it's never going to be that good.
Okay.
One other thing about the Huntress, which I mentioned later in the notes, but I'll just go ahead and say now for sake of time and since we're on it. Matt, I don't think either you or I fully appreciated why the Huntress was famous. For us, Huntress was just always Helena Bertinelli, right?
Right.
But in hindsight, obviously she has her origin in the late 70s as the daughter of Batman and Catwoman on Earth 2. And in hindsight, it really makes a lot of sense. Oh, that's why she's so prominent in this comic. It's a Batman Catwoman romance comic. And
Yes.
so that's why it's important to have Huntress, because I think we both felt Huntress's inclusion in this story was really random when we were kids. And I think at that point we did know that there was an Earth 2 Huntress, but I don't think we like appreciated that for people of a certain age. That was primarily what they thought of Huntress.
We were just like, "Oh, they had to put some boobies in there." But
They got to
that
show some midriff and some thigh.
right, that was probably partially the case, but at the other time, for people now that we look back at our age now, we're, "Oh, yeah, they were trying to make a connection there." There was a reason for her existence in the story, and then the whole thing with Batman having to come to a realization that she's better than he thought she was.
Yeah, which is annoying because that's already happened like 3 times in
Yes.
the 90s.
He always second guess.
Yeah, yeah. But Dixon has done that in his Detective Comics run. Morrison has done that in their JLA run, and I think Cry for Blood had come out by this time, and so Rucka had done that in Cry for Blood too.
So, Bob, on another character from the '90s, though, that was brought back here, it's mentioned and hinted at, but I think there's more to it than I caught on to. Actually, I caught on to this in this read. They mentioned Sandra Consolvi, who we know from Night Quest: The Search. She's the one who healed Bruce Wayne when he broke his back. And the last time we saw her, she had been infantilized. She's just an infant now. Her brain doesn't function. She acts like a toddler.
It was at the climax of Night Quest: The Search.
That's a horrible comic too. So never go back and read that if you ever have to. But you can actually see her on page 49 and on page 54 in the room with the surgery. So I think that's how Bruce actually was healed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I
I
think
see her on.
Tommy just put the thing because he's so cocky and confident. I mean, and he's apparently a surgeon of everything. Did you notice that? There's more to it that we don't know. I think Cassandra was paid off.
That's funny, that's funny. I have to admit, I remember us flipping out about the mention of Sandra Consolving when we were kids reading this. I don't think either of us caught on when we were kids reading this that she was actually in the OR with Tommy Elliott.
Right. And I didn't understand her powers at that point because I hadn't really read Night Quest: The Search all the way through. I just read the
Mhm.
novelization, and they really just kind of skim over that shit in that novelization.
That is a wild return. And then I guess the other thing, I 2 things I would say about Tommy Elliott, AKA Hush at this point. On the one hand, it is interesting that Tommy Elliott basically does have Thomas Wayne's job, although like Thomas Wayne, he's whatever kind of doctor the story needs him to be. But I wonder if that's something in the later Hush comics we'll see. I don't think it is, but maybe it is something we'll see in later Hush comics that they tend to play up, that Tommy Elliott has Tom Wayne's job. That's kind of funny. And then the other thing I want to stress, which I just find a hilarious idea, and it's the way to make me love Hush, is we learn in these pages that Tommy Elliott works at a Philly hospital. And just imagining him with a Philly accent really makes me laugh.
You're like, how stupid would his Aristotle sound, Bob?
Yeah, Hush just railing off Aristotle quotes in a thick Philly accent.
Apparently, it's one of the hardest accents to do, so I'm not going to attempt.
So, Matt, to your question, I did catch the Jimmy Olsen reference, but I did not catch the Peter Parker reference. Where's the Peter Parker?
There's Peter Parker's on the left side on page 54. Yeah, you
Yeah, I
Jimmy?
see him. I see him. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Totally missed that.
We all thought
Well,
Spider Man was Hush.
we all thought Spider-Man was Hush. Well, Matt, for part 3, that's issue number 610, The Beast. Matt, do you remember when Amanda Waller appearances were cool and didn't happen every month and were not legally mandated by the HBO Discovery Corporation?
When she wasn't the Samuel L. Jackson of DC. I like the way she looks here. I like my Waller built like Kingpin. She's going to kick Batman if he tells her off. I love
No,
it when
that's
she looks
good.
more like this.
That's good. Matt, how do you feel about Hush having a pet name for Alfred? Alf.
Hey, it's lame. I hated everything about any interaction between Alfred and Tommy Elliott was bad.
I didn't necessarily hate it as much as I hated everything else about Tommy Elliott. Although I do think the fact that Hush, Tommy Elliott, has Clarence the chauffeur, and that could be Hush's Alfred, I feel like there's potential there they didn't explore. If you're going to make Hush the Batman from the other side, right, go all the way. Give him an evil Alfred.
They really should have done that because, I mean, the chauffeur could have been the one that cuts the brakes and everything that causes the
Yeah,
whole
he could have done
accident.
it for Tommy. Tommy told him to do it, and he did it.
Yeah, man, we should go back and rewrite the story.
So, on that note, to you, does it cheapen the Batman origin story that he had a best friend who also lost his parents first. Granted, I think his mom lingered for a while, but I don't know. I feel the parallelism there a little too strong, maybe a little too strong.
Not really, but I do remember at the time being super annoyed they were introducing a new character. And then in my mind, I thought there's no way he could be the villain of this. No way. That is too obvious.
Yeah, we psyched ourselves out for that.
Yes. Yes, we did. We thought it was going to be some crazy reveal, but I mean, they took us through the entire history of Batman with all the characters and then gave us a brand new character. So you can't, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it was a bad idea. Now, you would probably disagree, but
What else do you want to hit us with from 610 The Beast, Matt?
I do want to say, Bob, that the Batmobile tire is blown out. That's the next big mystery because somebody just keeps shooting at Batman. Yeah, they're cutting his lines and then they blow out his tires. And we all thought it was Deadshot again because he got really good at it. And then on page 74, Bob, I really think Batman uses his grapnel in a creative way to take out Killer Croc in a way that I have not seen choreographed this way in a comic ever. He
Oh,
shoots the
interesting.
grapnel at Killer Croc's head, unhooks it so the momentum of the grapnel keeps pulling Croc out through a window. The way it's just perfectly executed on page. That I give props to Jim Lee for that one scene.
Nice.
And then on page 76, Bob, Hush is standing next to a sign that says Robins. And this was a huge red herring at the time. Everybody was
Mm.
talking about it. So I wanted to point it out.
I remember us talking about it now that you say it, but I totally skimmed by it when I was reading this. All right, so we're to number 611, which is I think part 4 at this point, The City. And Matt, to begin with a complaint, look, it's a really cool image of young Batman and young Hush looking up at the Golden Age Green Lantern, Alan Scott, but I am going to be a pedant and say, what is he doing in Metropolis? He's a Gotham hero.
I mean, and Bruce asked the exact same thing you just said, Bob, on page 85. What's he doing in Metropolis? I heard he was from Gotham.
Uh, I
So
I'm owned. I'm owned.
good question. And he is fighting Icicle Senior, which I thought was awesome because seeing Icicle and then Icicle Junior playing such a big role in Young Justice.
Yeah, isn't it wild that Young Justice has given us both affection for Icicle?
Bob, did Metropolis have a hero before Superman? I feel like I should know this, but I
I
don't.
feel they probably did, but I don't know offhand. I'm sure that is part of 90s post-crisis lore of the integration. I now can't remember how 90s post-crisis handles Guardian. I guess was Guardian around in the 40s and in the post-crisis timeline? If he was, I assume he would have been a Metropolis hero,
Oh,
but there
yeah,
might have been others too.
that would have made sense. Well, Bob, we're in Metropolis. So of course, we got to have Lois Lane and Superman.
Yeah, and actually, Bruce hitting on Lois, I always find that fun. I find it fun, and especially the Batman Superman crossover movie from the 90s does that rather well. It's pretty fun here too.
You feel like Lois is a bit over sexualized here, Bob?
Oh, totally, totally. I wasn't even gonna mention it because I just assume all women in a Jim Lee comic are
Yeah.
over-sexualized,
Ooh,
but I'm glad you brought it up. It's a little distracting, right? And it's worse because there's a whole running joke in this issue too about people mishearing therapist as the rapist. And so having this really lame running joke at the same time that Lois is drawn in this super cheesecake way, it's not great.
yeah. And what's worse about Bob is that's a stolen joke from Saturday Night Live.
Oh, I
So
know, I
yeah,
know.
yeah. Straight from Celebrity Jeopardy, Daryl Hammond, Sean Connery impression. That's the jokes. I don't know why they thought was he watching that or was Jeff Lowe watching that rerun or that show and was like, hey, I'll just throw that in there.
And it's a funny joke on SNL in the
Yeah.
context of like a Jeopardy setup. That's a
Right.
funny joke.
Yeah.
But in the context of people arguing over how to spell words in a newsroom, it's not funny.
Couple of weird little things here, Bob. That's going to point out. Lois is wearing a pearl necklace, which Martha
Yeah.
Wayne wears a pearl necklace. It was an odd choice. I felt. You don't usually.
Oh, I
No.
thought I thought you were gonna talk about a wholly different kind of symbolism, and I'm
Bob,
glad you
Jesus Christ, what's
didn't. I'm
wrong with you?
glad you didn't.
Yeah.
No, no, I'm glad, I'm glad. No, that was but my question was, what's wrong with you for bringing that up, Matt? I noticed it, I thought it was cringy, and I kept going.
I just thought. Well, I'm just saying. It's just does she wear one in the animated series? I don't remember.
No, I'm pretty sure she does not. I
That's
could
what I
be
thought.
wrong.
It was just strange she had that when I'm thinking that's usually a Martha Wayne type thing. So it was interesting to see, especially considering we see later on so many flashbacks with the pearls being broken and stuff.
To me, the last thing I'll say about this issue, I forgot how much Ivy mind controlling Catwoman was a plot point of this story, and, obviously and justly, Catwoman is very angry about it. Which is really interesting because I'm pretty sure in later comics, Gotham City Sirens and some Harley Quinn comics, Catwoman and Ivy are buds, I'm pretty sure. And so I wonder if anybody ever had to do like a story where Ivy apologizes or rescues Catwoman or there's some sort of makeup.
I'm sure there is. It would make sense. But we'll talk about this towards the end. But the stories that follow Hush and Broken City, it takes a while for them to come back around to what happens. I almost want to go back and reread all of those things just to get some clarity, because I don't remember off the top of my head.
I honestly think if you do go back, you'll be disappointed because I think it'll probably pick up on it in such a scattershot way that it's not going to be particularly satisfying if that's the main thing you're reading it for.
Yeah, I feel like they pumped out annuals to answer a lot of my questions I have, which
And
tells
this
you a
was
lot of,
back at
which tells you a lot about my personality.
this was back in the kind of the dying days of annuals too.
Right, right.
All right. So our next issue, Matt, I think is this issue 5.
Issue 5, Bob. Yes, this
Uh
is a battle.
612, the battle.
Of the issues, Bob, this is definitely my favorite because of Batman's inner monologue concerning his relationship with Superman. And the pacing to me in this issue is perfect. It's so fast paced. You also get a whole complete story of how it starts off. There's sort of a finish to this. I feel like this is the middle, and then you go into the opera for the next one, which is a whole different plot in of itself, in my opinion.
Well, Matt, if you like interlocking Batman Superman narratives, do I have a comic for you? It's called Batman/Superman. It's written by one Jeff Loeb and drawn by the Jim Lee we have at home, Ed Benes, and it's one of the worst comics ever made.
Yeah, I like the issue here because they're fighting each other, Bob. This is the Superman Batman fighting we wanted on the film. This will forever be the best Superman Batman fight.
Oh God, hard disagree, man. Into Dark Knight Returns. What are you even talking about?
Oh yeah, never mind. Forgot about that. Yeah. Okay, that number 2, Bob. Number 2.
I want to say that I'm okay with Batman and Superman fighting, but I generally take the position that yeah, Batman and Superman are friends. They shouldn't fight.
Yeah.
But I want to say that there's a better number 2 Batman Superman fight, but I don't know what it would be. The only one I know is Dark Knight Returns offhand.
So there we go. Bob. So this is the top 3.
I do like the image of a vine hanging around Superman's neck because Ivy's mind controlling him. That's pretty cool.
That is cool.
And also, as a part of the kind of Batman Superman conflict, him having Catwoman in his back pocket and her dropping Lois to distract Superman is really, really funny. I do really find that hilarious.
Yeah, but then Batman saying, if we had to, Catwoman could catch her. There's no way. She dropped her. She's gonna catch her. That's how gravity works.
Well, and speaking of the women of the DCU making up and being friends, it's really funny that in the Tom King run, which I do have to say, rereading Hush, I don't like admitting this, but Hush is hugely, hugely influential on 2 Batman runs. I do rather like Grant Morrison's run and Tom King's run. It's the art in parts of Grant Morrison's run that's done by Tony Daniel. He's totally doing Jim Lee aesthetic. Morrison is really trying to do Hush, but better with the black glove. And then Tom King's Batman Catwoman romance, I just didn't realize how much he's directly taking from this. And it's funny because in that Tom King run, Catwoman and Lois Lane are all buddy buddy. They're definitely the boyfriend's girls who are also friends. And that's especially in the issue where they all go to the amusement park, which is a really fun issue. And it's just funny, this being the backstory to that.
Yeah, there's got to be a makeup story somewhere. I just don't know where.
I'm actually not sure that there is. I'm almost certain there's not a Catwoman Lois Lane one. And now that I think about it, I'm not even sure there is a Catwoman Ivy story, but that would be a funny little short story if someone were to do. Maybe you just combine it where Catwoman has to be apologized to by Ivy and has to apologize to Lois.
That could be a good little backed up for an annual there. That'd be a good one.
I do say we were giving Jeff Loeb a lot of crap, deservedly so, for the bad jokes and the over sexualizing Lois in the last issue. But I do have to give him credit. He has Crypto stop Ivy, but he doesn't do a joke about a dog peeing on a bush, which the level of restraint from Jeff Loeb on those pages, my God, my
Yeah.
God.
Ooh, yeah. Crypto's my favorite part of the issue, Bob. I love him showing up. It was out of nowhere. And this dog's gonna be the future of DC, Bob. Telling you, that Superman movie drops. Crypto's everywhere.
He's a good dog. I love that dog.
Good dog.
Very good dog. Very good dog. All right, Matt, I also do think that Hush being a little jealous of Superman and Batman being friends is very funny. And I almost want Hush to just become a Superman attack. He's Batman's my boy. I like him, but I don't like his new friend. I'm going to ruin Superman's life because he's friends with my friend.
I mean, that's what he does, though, Bob. If you think about it in his grand scheme, he was the one that he was gonna really mess up Superman pretty bad.
That's funny. Well, to keep moving, I think this would it be part 6, number 613, the opera? And Matt, I gotta say, I don't know anything about opera. I'm almost tempted to get into opera so I can have opinions about how Batman comics use opera because they do mention opera quite a lot.
I don't know, it's something to do with a lot of clowns, Bob. Did you not notice that, though? There's posters of clowns everywhere.
A lot of clowns, a lot of
A lot of clowns.
clowns.
And Bob, on page 127, we get a shot of Leslie talking. All right, and this is important because it's causing issues already with Hush too, because she's portrayed as an older woman here, and she's much younger looking in the recent comics.
I'm willing to give the retroactive continuity the benefit of the doubt, right? If you change something, I just assume it's changed in the prior comics too.
But I will say here, Bob, I don't know if Leslie knows Catwoman and Selena Kyle are one and the same. She says she acts like she does, but I thought Selena had a secret identity.
That was a question I really didn't know either, was what was the status of Catwoman's identity? Because she had that long-running solo series, which I think was maybe still going on at the time of this book. I'm not sure. But she had that long-running '90s solo series that I think went over 100 issues, and I think they did some stories about her secret identity in that, but I haven't read much of that book, and I don't know what the status quo of it is.
I tried to find information about if Leslie appeared in those comics, but I couldn't find anything.
I
I
tend
don't.
to think she didn't, but I could be totally wrong.
And then the last time we see, prior to this, they kind of redone Catwoman's secret identity thing a little bit. She showed up in Nightfall on a
Mhm.
plane, and like Bruce doesn't really know who she is, and she had to introduce herself and all this.
Yeah, and that's, like, early in the Catwoman '90s series, right? Because
Right.
like, the Catwoman series maybe even launches during Night Quest.
I believe so. And then, but then you also have, if you include Long Halloween and the relationship she has with Bruce there, like retroactively, it changes it to where he would have to.
Yeah, because I bet I might be wrong, but I bet the '90s Catwoman series, which was pretty well running before Long Halloween, probably never reflects Long Halloween, where clearly Jeff Loeb is reflecting his own work
Yes,
in this comic. Yeah,
which
that's a good point.
which makes sense. It's just, yeah, there is a lot of confusion with that piece.
That is interesting. Another small point just on Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb really pushing the bisexuality hard on different female supervillains, which again,
Yes.
maybe was already a thing for some of these or many of these, but I think might be new. It is interesting that Harley is pretty horny for Selena on this in this issue.
They tested some of it with the animated series, Bob, but then this is when they really started going hard with it because of the Jim Lee's art.
Maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like in the animated series, it's just Harley and Ivy.
Correct. Yes.
Another interesting question for you, Matt. So we have had a lot of Bruce and Tommy flashbacks. And even by the standards of young boys, do they not fight an awful lot?
Yeah, they thought it was stupid too. Way too dramatic. I don't think Jeff Loeb gets how to write younger children, which is what it is.
Even setting aside the fact that Batman's Bruce Wayne or Bruce Wayne is Batman and Tommy Elliott's Hush and the trauma of Bruce losing.
Yeah,
Yeah, no wonder these guys haven't talked for 20 years.
might as well just hate each other.
Well, Matt, one thing I will say, and I guess this is going to be the rare exception where I praise something Jim Lee does. The big cliffhanger here at the end of the opera issue is we have the Joker come out. And the fact that the Joker's head kind of looks like a cow, kind of looks like a cow, I actually think that's a cool effect. I don't like Jim Lee's Joker that much, but I do think that's a pretty cool effect.
I am of the complete opposite opinion on that one, Bob. I do. This is the one character design I never really cared for. He always looks like an alien to me with that sharp nose. He doesn't look human. The appearance is too off. I've never cared for Jim Lee's Joker, especially that one issue where you would see his head covered half the cover. And you had all the villains. I think it was the final issue of Hush. There was a separate cover you could get that had that folded out. I don't know if you remember this.
I don't, not at all.
Oh, like a poster, you could see all the villains, and they were over Batman.
So that might be a tie-in for Hush. I also maybe almost want to say it was like a tie-in for Battle for the Cow, that crossover after Batman RIP.
That is
That
possible, yes. But that Jim Lee Joker always stuck with me, and I just don't like it. It just doesn't look right to
Mm.
me sometimes. But hey, it teaches on.
Far be it from me to defend Jim Lee.
Yeah. All right, Bob. So the next issue, issue 614, Joke. This is another one of those will he, won't he kill the Joker stories. Nightfall Part 9, which was Batman number 496, to me, is always the better beat of the Joker and don't kill him issue. That's the one I always care for. I like better than this.
I agree with you, and it's not just because we were 7 when we read
Yeah,
that issue. Or 8. It genuinely is a better issue, I think, and I think it's a lot more moving.
it is.
I think there's also one at the end of No Man's Land after Joker murders Sarah Essen,
Yes, yes.
which is mentioned in this issue in
It is,
general.
which I appreciated that. And I feel like once again, I think this is a way to bring in new readers so they would feel more familiar with what's going on. You know, because they go all these flashbacks. They tell you everything that they want you to know about the chronology of Batman.
Well, and I hope this makes sense to you. I'll go ahead and bring it up here. I do think it is wild coming back to this and seeing how much Jeff Loeb is referencing 90s stuff. Like you said, there's the murder of Sarah Essen is being referenced. Chandra King Solving makes a cameo. The role of Harold later
Right.
in the series, right? And on the one hand, it just reflects that the 90s were not so far away when this comic came out, right? Nobody would do that stuff now because it's decades later. But when this came out 20 years ago, it wasn't so far away, the 90s, which is interesting. But I guess you do have to give it to Jeff Loeb for being willing to tie up a lot of really loose threads from 90s Batman, especially Sarah Essen wasn't a loose thread, but Chandra King Solving and Harold were very much loose threads. And Jeff Loeb ties them up here.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we'll talk about Harold a little later down the road. That one's a little iffy for me. But as far as this issue goes, Bob joke, I don't have much to say about it.
I will say I do like Harley with the mallet sneaking up on Batman. I mean, I don't think that's original to this. I'm sure the animated series did it before, but it's a good gag. And this has also been something I've wanted to point out. The flashbacks, and not just in this one, but this was maybe where it was most prominent. The sort of style of the coloring with like watercoloring of the flashbacks and the way Lee kind of modifies his line work for the flashbacks. It really reminds me of the art of Dustin Nguyen, and that's especially true when we have this flashback image of Barbara Gordon as Batgirl.
They do the same thing with Jason Todd later on in a later issue. And I feel like they represent the core happy memories Batman has of these people in his
Exactly.
life.
Exactly. And then the images of Batman and Batgirl, like soaring over the city, swinging over the city, really does remind me of Tim Sale as well. And of course, in the flashback to the Killing Joke, Jim Lee is really intentionally, in an interesting way, reproducing Brian Boland's art from when Joker shoots Barbara.
I did always think there was a weird image at the bottom of page 156 in the lower right panel of Barbara arching her back a little. It's
Yeah.
meant to be like she's like young and vibrant and girly, but to me, it just looks like sexist shit. But
Yeah, it comes off as really weird and over sexualized,
yeah,
right?
yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we could say in that panel, Jim Lee is aping Greg Land, who, if you don't know, listeners, Greg Land is eternally like tracing his panels from pornography.
There's another part about it bothered me. Catwoman pulls Batman off of Joker with her whip and she wraps it around his neck, which she knows he had a head injury, right?
I will say, I do think this gets interestingly recontextualized in the Tom King Batman, where the Joker is Catwoman's very problematic gay friend. That's the way I could describe how Tom King writes Catwoman and Joker's relationship. And so
Yeah.
in this comic, it's very much about Catwoman's, no, Batman, you can't come back from this. It'll take you to a dark place. But I like to imagine that secretly she's like, no, don't murder my problematic gay
It's
bestie.
interesting to go back and read this, knowing what Tom King does with this relationship.
Yeah, because on the one hand, obviously, Tom King's run hugely influenced by the Batman Catwoman dynamic here, but on the other hand, goes in radically different
Yeah.
directions with it.
Yeah. So Bob,
Well,
did you,
speaking of people trying to stop Batman, right? Gordon shoots off Batman's ear on his cowl, which I actually think is a very cool idea, but I think the way it's executed in the story and on the page is not actually very cool.
once again, I want to point out that Batman had a head injury.
Hey
Gordon
man,
shooting his damn
Jim
sharp
Gordon's
shooting
aim
his
is
head.
just that good. It's just that good.
Did you know it was going to be Gordon before the reveal?
I think I did because who else would shoot at Batman but not kill him? Unless it was more hush mind games, right? Like if it was somebody trying to stop him, then yeah, it makes sense that it would be Gordon. I think I didn't remember that. I probably didn't call it when we were kids, but I think when I was reading it, even without remembering it was Gordon, I was like, this is probably Gordon.
At the end of the issue, Bob, they give us this little red herring here. We've got Harvey Dent flipping a coin. We find out it's Harvey Dent later.
Yeah, and at the point when I was rereading this, and I think also when we originally read it, I thought Hush had just stolen Two Face's coin.
Right. But we find out no, Harvey Dent's actually the one who contacted Gordon to let him know that needed to come help Batman because Batman's about to murder Joker.
In the next issue, 615, The Dead, do we maybe have your favorite panel, your favorite page of the
Oh yeah,
entire comic?
page 180 is awesome, Bob. We got the Batmobile garage, and there's the Batman Forever Batmobile and the 66 Batmobile. And of course, which Batmobile did they decide to take, Bob? The really dumb looking one, the one that looks like a dick.
Honestly, I'm having a hard time seeing it because there's not a good, really good
It
splash
just looks
page
like
of
a
it.
big battering ram and Nightwing sitting behind Batman.
It sorta is supposed to be like a souped up version of the '50s one, right?
They're sitting like one behind the other, like a plane on the ground.
Mhm.
Okay.
As long as we're criticizing things, I just really wanna say that they have a joke on page 182 where they say the Denny's on Adams Street. That is such a bad joke. It makes me so angry. It's so dark. Well, Matt, so the Riddler's in this issue, and I enjoy the Riddler having a good time in this issue, but you were saying this was, controversial at the time?
Yes, Bob. At the time, I remember everyone being off at how second rate the Riddler was being treated here compared to the rest of the Rogues Gallery. And it plays off in the end. Riddler used to be so much better.
I don't know, that's always been a part, though, of the Riddler, too. I remember they do this in Nightfall, they do this in Denny O'Neil's The Question. There's a lot of Riddler stories where the Riddler's like, "I'm lame, nobody likes me anymore." The Neil Gaiman Riddler Annual does that, too. Yeah.
Yeah, but he got a boost after Batman Forever.
That's true. And definitely, I think people are more coasting off how they portray him in the animated series, maybe than how he ever actually was in the comic, in a sense.
True. Yeah. And Bob, on 191, we do find out that it was Harvey Dent behind those bandages. Do you have any thoughts on Harvey Dent, the Harvey Dent reveal?
When I was rereading this, I didn't remember. I thought healed Harvey Dent was introduced after this in the same way. I just assumed that would be Clayface and that this was a tease, and then they actually resurrect Jason Todd because this was a popular comic. I assumed that they actually brought back like healed Harvey Dent later.
The whole Harvey Dent thing to this seat just shoved into me. I never really got it. But it goes back into this next issue, which is issue 616, Bob, Assassins. And
Mhm.
when we say the word assassins, Bob, we have to talk about Talia and we have to talk about Ra's al Ghul, the League of Assassins.
Yeah, it's
And
contractually obligated.
the worst image in the entire Hush series is on page 197. I hate this image now and forever. It's so stupid looking. The blank face on Talia is horrible. Proportions are awful. And on top of that, just the way she's drawn falling from the sky.
So, Matt, I'm gonna have to disagree with you on this slightly. To me, the Talia stuff on this page doesn't bother me at all. Oh, it's Jim Lee drawing an over-sexualized woman. So the physics of her falling and looking like a normal Jim Lee woman, which is to say not looking like a normal woman at all, that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is I hate this Batman costume. This is the worst Batman costume.
Bob, everyone agrees with you on this, Bob, because that is the only Hush action figure that would not sell.
Oh, thank God. Thank God.
I mean, you get that one's in clearance bins all over the place. So
Yeah, it's awful, man. It's awful. It's everything that's bad. Matt, you and every other Batman fan is going to disagree with me, but I'm just going to say it. This is the logical extreme of you start from the treads on the boots, and this is where it leads you.
yes, Bob, because that's where Batman is now in 2026 or 2025 with Jim Lee at the top of the game there. Batman's become this. Have you seen his new suit, Bob?
I have not seen the new suit.
Oh,
man.
yeah, it looks more like what you want. So,
Oh, that's something at least. That's something. And then yeah, Harvey Dent's plans, man, they continue to be weird. I don't have
Yeah,
much to say about
yeah.
them, but you
Why?
talk to us about them.
Harvey Dent, Bob, he can't do anything just in a traditional way. He shows up to let Joker out of jail, out of Arkham. Just he's, I'm an attorney now. I'm going to let you out of jail. You didn't do it. Okay, that just works like anything. Then he shows up in James Gordon's bedroom while he's sleeping to tell him he's still alive.
On the one hand, I appreciate that you need to swerve, right? This is not the way you would think you would do a Harvey Dent Returns comic. And so in that way, it's a strength. But on the other hand, Harvey Dent actually coming back should be the biggest deal ever.
Right.
And this doesn't seem at all the way to do it, right?
On top of this, though, he's just some random bald dude in a turtleneck. He doesn't have the look or act like Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent with the way he talks. It's just weird. Anyway, we do get to see Ra's al Ghul, Bob. So
Yeah, he has tiki torches. That he really has a huge tiki torch collection. That's funny.
you got to keep the bugs off, Bob. I mean, he's been dead how many times?
Oh, yeah, good point. Good point.
Yeah,
And we do get into the dynamic in these issues where it does seem Talia is constantly menacing Batman's other ex-girlfriends, right? So first it was Lois, then it was Leslie, although yeah, Leslie not actually an ex-girlfriend, and then now it's Talia. And so we have to have Lady Shiva come save Talia from Catwoman.
Yeah, Lady Shiva is the one character I forget makes an appearance in these comics, but she gets taken out by Talia with a wooden chair, Bob.
Talia is a good martial artist, and she's a little bit cheating, right, by using a weapon. So I guess I can live with it. Jeff Loeb clearly doesn't get the genius of Shiva.
Yeah.
So issue number 617, The Grave, Matt. Now, look, I know this is a fake out, but just assuming it wasn't a fake out, what's worse? Not telling your son that he has a new stepmother, which is what Batman pretends to do with Tim Drake, or what Batman actually does, which is to use your son to stalk his new stepmother because you're not sure if you can trust her.
Your son stalking your new stepmother is way worse.
Both are pretty bad, but
Yeah,
yeah, I think you're probably right.
because then you're bringing a child into an adult situation. But did you catch that it was a ruse from Tim's dialogue
Well,
before?
I know Tim fighting Catwoman is a ruse, but was Tim stalking Catwoman a ruse?
I think yes, it was all part of the plan. I believe so.
I didn't catch that. So
I
okay, sure. I will say I was talking about this with my guy Noah. Man, I on the one hand I appreciate Jeff Loeb even bringing Tim Drake into this comic. He could have just left him out. But on the other hand, man, this does signal that after the 90s, people just had no idea what to do with Tim Drake.
Oh, true. And that was the thing too, Bob. You just said that they had to bring him in because they want to make sure they're telling everything they can about Batman here. The whole point of this was to introduce new fans. They're not going to leave Tim out.
Even though they proceeded to leave him out for much of the next 20 years.
Well, yeah, yeah. Because I mean, he became Red Robin, Bob.
I will say, I hate the Huntress cycle. I hate the cross on the Huntress cycle. And I don't think there's any reason for Scarecrow to be in this comic other than every villain has to be in this comic. But Scarecrow on the Huntress cycle with its big cross, actually a pretty cool image, I gotta say.
I got to say that, Bob. I forgot Scarecrow was here too. He's the villain. I forget that was in this thing. Mad Hatter does not make an appearance, surprisingly. Do you dig those Scarecrow here, just rambling off nursery rhymes like he did in Long Halloween?
I don't dig it at all, but I don't expect anything else from Jeff Loeb, especially when Scarecrow is the 12th villain in a 13 villain story.
The end
Matt,
of this issue,
we see this outfit, and should we call this outfit, Matt, Robin Hush or Hush Robin? What should the name of this costume be?
Bob. This is Jason Todd. That's what this is. This
Yeah,
is
but answer the question. Is it Robin
I
Hush or is it Hush Robin?
I call it Robin Hush if he's got the or and if he's got the or on the circle. There's an H
Okay.
for Hush. This is Robin Hush,
Okay.
but this is Jason Todd. So, Bob, we are reaching a point in our recording where we're going to take a small little intermission because, Bob, do you still like intermissions, Bob? You told me you don't like them in the past, but we're going to take an intermission here.
Oh God,
So,
are we actually going to talk about the intermission in this stupid comic?
no, Bob, we're not going to talk about the intermission. We're actually going to pause the recording and we're going to put on part 2 of Hush versus Broken City. Sound good to you, Bob?
Sounds good to me, Matt. Sounds
All
good.
right. So if you want to continue with our coverage of Hush, and we haven't even touched on Broken City, just pop in, hit part 2. See you in a minute.